And action. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billy, and I'm your host. I have a lot of ground to cover with you today. First of all, for 6 months, I've been bringing you content, which I hope is fun and interesting. I try really hard to mix things up and keep it surprising. You never know what adventure we might go on or what rabbit hole we might fall down. My channel doesn't serve you ads yet, since I don't have a big enough following to earn money. So all I'm asking in return from you is simple, very simple, your engagement. Subscribe, like, and comment. All of those things help me get better ranking within YouTube and will help get this content suggested to more viewers. If you don't ever want to miss an episode, the only way to get notified is to subscribe, and not just subscribe, but hit the bell. And not just any bell, but the top bell is the best bell. Since I don't podcast on a regular basis, it behooves you to select that one because just subscribing is not enough. If you choose that top bell, some kind of notification will pop up on your device or on your computer to let you know that I have something out. And especially if I go live, which I'm planning to do in the next week or two, probably my very next episode, I'll be going live with a guest and we'll be interactive. And the only way that you're going to get notified that that's happening and is on, well, first, if you follow me on Ravelry or Instagram, where I'm Billy Toy, you'll hear about it in advance. But I think the best way really is to hit that bell and get the notification. And then if you happen to be online at that time, you'll know about it right away in the moment. Okay, enough about that. I wanted to share with you a little something, not so personal, but none of the men in my family are jocks. And while my father earned his PhD at Purdue, which has a very outstanding college football team, he never played, nor did my husband, nor did my son. The only organized sports team that I know of any of them being on was Little League baseball. So in our home on Sundays, the men were never gathered around the television watching the NFL. Consequently, I grew up knowing very little about football, except for this little booklet, which I purchased in 1969, A Woman's Guide to Football, which even went so far as to show you different formations on the field. It's a handy little book to have. Why am I telling you this? In case I'm ever on Jeopardy, and I have tried out a couple of times and unfortunately didn't make the cut, but in case I'm ever on, I think it's important to know a little something. So I happen to know that Tom Brady has won more Super Bowls than anyone else in the history of the game. And I heard him being interviewed on Super Bowl Sunday recently. One of the questions that they asked him was the secret to his success. And what do you think his answer was? Of course, practice. He said, practice is what's required to get good at something. And since you'll be doing a lot of it, it should be something that you enjoy doing, that you love doing. That's what he said. And I immediately thought, well, it's a good thing. I really love to knit. I enjoy doing it. And I guess I have been practicing every day since the beginning of this pandemic. And you probably have been doing the same. I don't know about you. I'd love for you to comment below, but I have found that I have improved with practice. I knit faster, and I think I'm able to understand patterns more easily. And I'd love to know in what ways you think that you've improved over the last year since we've been in confinement for so much of the time. I recently learned that a sweater that I test knit, it's not a vintage pattern, but it appealed to me. And I offered to test knit for a designer named Corrado Lark. I'll insert a picture here so that you can see the sweater. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention in case you're not exclusively vintage. Um, the pattern is now available on Ravelry, and I'll put a link below to that so that you can find it. A couple of weeks ago, I attended online a seminar sponsored by the London School of Economics on knitting in the 1920s and 30s. Ellie Reed, the speaker, showed a bunch of old magazine covers, which I was captivated by, and I'll show a series of them here. She also provided a link to a little pattern booklet that she created. And while it doesn't have complete patterns, it does have little stitch patterns so for specific vintage stitches. And I'll put a link in the show notes below so you can take a look at that booklet. If you were interested in any of these patterns, the full pattern, the Knitting and Crochet Guild has, I believe they said 50,000 patterns in their archives, and that's available to their members. And I believe membership is £25 a year. So that's something that you might want to look into. In a similar vein, I stumbled upon a website that shows fashion decade by decade. So how things were changing from 1890 to 1900, 1910, and so on. And I'll also put a link below for that. I found it very interesting. Many knitting podcasts talk about their acquisitions. And if you've been watching my podcast for a while, you know that I don't have a stash of yarn. And I tend not to acquire yarn unless it's for a specific project. So the acquisition that I want to share with you is not yarn, but it's very timely. My son, who has been researching since the beginning of this pandemic all things coronavirus, recommended that we purchase these masks. They're very super deluxe, costly, but have a built-in HEPA filter. I haven't worn it yet because there's a big production. There's a lot of instructions. On how to connect the mask to this tubing, and then the tubing to this battery operated HEPA filter. And there's a lanyard so you can wear this around your neck, and you have to sort of prime it before the first use. So I had to first charge the battery, and then let it run for a couple of hours. So this is supposed to really help protect from the new variants of COVID-19. You might remember I talked about this year being the year of Fifi, finish it first. And I've committed to myself that before I begin new projects, I want to make a concerted effort to complete languishing projects. So this was something that I started not too long ago. It knit up pretty quickly. I think I've shown parts of it in prior episode, but it is now finished. So let me stand up and show you. Corset on the sleeves, and then the back. And I decided to insert a zipper. I hand sewed the zipper in. This was really fun to knit. It's a Mary Maxim pattern that was gifted to me by one of my early guests, Michelle Mark. And it's knit with chunky yarn. I used Sandnes garn. I think it's called Frittit's garn. I'll put it on the screen. And I selected these colors because I had purchased this handbag and I wanted to knit something that would coordinate with it. So I don't know if anybody else does this. Maybe you could comment. I seem to get my accessories together and build things around them. I think it's easier to do that because I have control over what I knit. I can't control the color of a handbag that already exists or something that I'm not making, but I can control what I make. So I'm finding more and more, I buy the hat or I buy the handbag and then build around it. And that's the case here. I also purchased this pin after I had the handbag. I don't think I had the yarn yet, but I knew that the pin was going to coordinate with the bag, so whatever I was going to knit was going to work with it. And I knew that I was going to be knitting this horse theme jacket, so I thought that's great. This is a vintage celluloid pin. And then I decided, well, I have to have a little beret to go with this, make it to an ensemble. So I completed that too. So two finished objects and something else in the works. So the pattern is called Prairie Prancers. It's a child's pattern, but I worked out my measurements and scaled everything up so that I could get it to fit me. And I'm really, really happy. Not only was it a quick knit, it was easy. The pattern was very clear. They show you a chart for everything. The entire thing is charted from the first row to the last. Well, actually, not the ribbing. They don't chart that. But starting here. And I did something on this sweater that I hadn't done before, and it's now become my practice. I knit the sleeve first. Instead of swatching, I figured rather than do a 4x4 inch, I could start to knit here, and nothing wasted. If it wasn't giving me the gauge that I wanted, I would just rip it out and try again, um, which you'd be doing with a swatch kind of anyway. But I hit it right, and having an entire sleeve knit right off the bat was such a great thing to do that my next project, I did the same thing. Because you really feel like things are underway and it's not so daunting. You're not left on Sleeve Island at the end with two sleeves to finish. Um, so I guess I should talk about what's on my needles. I forgot to say that I used a website called Stitch Fiddle to chart out my colors, and I didn't like the design of their horse, so I was able to tweak their horse. But that's a really handy tool to have in your toolkit, because you can sort of see the scale of things and how it's going to look. And I do waist shaping. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to run interference um, with this. So I could see how it was going to play out on my number of stitches in advance before doing anything. Um, so I highly recommend that. Okay, so what's on my needles now is this 1951 pattern called Mademoiselle by Botany that I purchased online from one of my viewers, KillerKitsch. I'll put a link below in case other people are interested in this pattern. The pattern, which is in black and white, looks like it could have been knit in navy and white. And I thought, I really like that color combination, especially because I have this little hat. Let me grab the hat. I know I've shown this before, this little hat. Again, hat came first, yarn next. The yarn, by the way, again, is Sandnes yarn, but this is their duo yarn, which is part cotton and part wool. So again, as in the last sweater, I started with the sleeve first. And I just think it's a great idea to learn about this stitch, about the sequence of alternating stockinette, reverse stockinette, to get familiar with that before I moved on to the front and the back. So I started with the sleeve. I didn't finish the sleeve because I wasn't quite sure how long I need it to be and how it's going to fit into the armhole. So I still have live stitches here, which I'll come back and finish soon enough. My next piece that I knit was the back. By the time you have the back done and one sleeve, you feel like you're halfway through. Now in this particular pattern, there's an extra piece. The front is really two overlapping pieces. But before I leave the back, I just wanted to show you, it starts with this band of stockinette that will be turned under to create a hem. If you're knitting a vintage pattern that includes such a hem, comment below and let us know. I have a feeling that that's a fairly common thing. The couple of vintage patterns that I've knit from seem to have that. So there's the back, and this is the underneath front. It sort of crisscrosses, and then this will go over it. And I'm not sure, I might have an error here, but there'll be a collar. So it's kind of going to look like, let me see, you can't see that. Yeah, that's a better view. The collar, it's a little bit strange right now. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to go together, but this is a work in progress, so you'll be seeing more of it. So naturally, the yarn that was called for in the pattern has no doubt been discontinued. I didn't even bother to try and find it. But I chose a yarn that had a different gauge than the pattern. The pattern called for 8 stitches to the inch, and my chosen yarn is 5.5 stitches per the inch. But never mind, don't be put off by that. What I did, and of course you can do this too, is I tried a needle that I thought was the right size for this yarn, like what they said on the ball band. I chose a number 5 needle, and I liked the fabric that it made. It wasn't too floppy. I don't like a fabric that you can see through. I want it to be, kind of a tight firm weave. I think it hangs better when something has that kind of body to it. So what I did was, first of all, I set things up in my spreadsheet. And then I calculated, if they said that something was 96 stitches, I divided their 96 by the 8 stitches per inch, which told me how many inches they were getting. So for example, if their bust was 14 inches times 2 front and back, which is going to be 28 inches, well, that's not my bust. So I upped the inches so that I would have the right number of inches for my measurements. And then I calculated how many stitches at 5.5 stitches per inch do I need. And that's what I did with this sweater. That's what I've been learning to do. I'm getting better at it. And it's not difficult math at all. But part of having a good fit, and again, I'm not Andrea of Fruity Knitting. Her sweaters fit her like a glove. I'm getting better. My shoulders are narrow. It's hard to get things that fit in the shoulder and also fit in the bust because there's only so much decreasing that you can do before you throw everything off. So it's a little bit of a do-si-do kind of dance. But I was pretty pleased with this, that I was able to get it to, come in at my waist and then come out at my hips. And I felt like it fits appropriately all the way around. So now I'm starting to really learn the measurements that I need to use. And I almost always want to have waist shaping, even in a jacket like this, which someone else could knit just straight down and it would be fine. I'm putting waist shaping in. The white sweater that I showed you, there's waist shaping. I want it to be kind of form-fitting. I'm still working on my Thelma Viscountess Furness. Most of the knitting is done, but stitching up the seams, there's a seam down the top of the sleeve, and there's a seam up the side and under the arm. So that's still continuing. I will finish it. I work on it a little bit here and there when I'm watching a movie and it's mindless. So that will be another finished item pretty soon. I have not planned what my next pattern is. I know that these various things will be finished and I'll allow myself the possibility of moving on to another project. I wanted to propose something to you and I'd love to know what you think. I'm going to put a picture here of a cardigan that I am hoping to do as my future project. It has chevron kind of design. It's very plain. It's just the texture that's interesting. And I thought it would be fun to do a knit along with some of you. If other people are interested in knitting the same pattern, it is from a vintage pattern. So I know that it's going to have some unexpected twists and turns like they all do. And I thought it would be fun to be able to compare notes with other people who'll be doing it at the same time. Also selecting the yarn. I've already been scouring Ravelry and looking at various websites, trying to find a yarn that doesn't have a lot of halo. I don't want anything to detract from this very smooth, very plain pattern. I want the pattern to really pop. And I want it to be at a fine gauge. So I'm struggling a little bit with that, but it would be kind of fun. Misery loves company. It'd be kind of fun to be doing that with other people who want to knit the sweater, and maybe other people will find yarns and suggest, hey, if you use this yarn, it's going to look like this. Here's some examples I've seen. I just think we could have a dialogue, and that would be kind of a fun thing to do. So let me know what you think. I'll put a picture of the pattern here and a link to where you can get it. And then if you would go to my Ravelry group, which is called Show and Tell, and just post there that you're interested. I'll open a thread for that. Um, I'm not ready to start right away, and I could postpone my start date because goodness knows I have unfinished projects that I can go back, pull out, and work on. Um, but I think sometime in the next month or so, and I would give people a chance to order their yarn, it could be a fun thing to do together. So let me know what you think. Okay, so I think that about wraps it up for this time. I'll see you on the next episode. Until then, everybody be safe, wear your masks, keep on doing whatever you've been doing, and stay out of trouble. Keep knitting. Bye, everyone.